From Earth to Uranus. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Jason Burns.
And I'm Danny Nucci, and this is the What About podcast.
What an interesting day I'm having, Danny. I spent my morning doing a dog and cat CPR class, and then here
I'm sorry, what it sounded like you said was I was doing a dog and cat CPR class. Were you using actual animals here?
No, this was just like
simulated animals. Do they create like a no, they do not have a dog-cat simulated.
It's more of a.
Do they have breath?
No, but you can do mouth to snout if you need to.
Mouth to snout.
Yeah, it's more of a last resort type of thing.
Sure. Go on. I'm sorry I interrupted you. This is fascinating.
No, it was fascinating to me. There's a lot of different rules to giving dogs and cats compressions than there is with humans. But, and here's the interesting part, you still do it to the beat of staying alive.
I didn't realize that was a thing.
It is a thing. Yeah, you're supposed to do the staying alive, and that's the
oh, so that's the pause. So you go 1, 2,
Yep.
3, 4, pause, 1. I did not know that.
Was there a pause pun there for the dogs and cats?
No, I did. Only you would have heard that. I meant pause, like stop. Jesus Christ. Okay, let's talk about Kelly Weinersmith.
Yes, please do.
Is it Weinersmith or Weinersmith? Do you know?
I'm not 100% sure.
I didn't ask her. I didn't feel like it was an appropriate question.
I did. Neither did I. But I think she would have had a good sense of humor about it. I know, but we're not really.
Know.
We don't do research like she does.
I was gonna say we're just hacks.
Yes.
We are amateurish hacks here. We don't even know if it's Weinersmith or Weinersmith. Nonetheless, what an interesting book and what a cool lady. She's written a book called A City on Mars, and yeah, it's terrific. Without further ado,
let's do it.
Kelly Weinersmith. Hi, Kelly.
Hey, guys. How's it going?
Going fantastic. How about you?
Look at that lovely microphone.
Oh, yeah. I almost know what I'm doing.
No, you do. I've heard.
Oh, good.
I listened. You know what you're doing.
Excellent. How's the day going for you guys?
It's awful. I can't live like this one more day. Horrible. I don't know how I do it, honestly. No, everything's great. Where are you? What part of the world are you in?
I'm in Charlottesville, Virginia.
Right. Isn't Rice University, though, in Texas?
It is, yes. I don't teach there. I'm adjunct, so that gets me access to their library resources for the research that I do. But they don't pay me.
And what research you do, my goodness.
It's weird shit.
No, it's not. It's friggin' fascinating. I was looking at the the questions, and I thought, well, that's great. I love that we're going to talk about, a city on Mars, but I have Soonish questions, which I was interested in. I may start with that. Soonish is a book that you wrote with your husband as well. What year was that published? Just so because it's not in front of me.
2017.
Okay. So 2017, what I want to know is in 2017, what was your opinion on AI? And what is your opinion on AI now in terms of where we're going? Because I appreciate your informed opinion.
Here's where I'm going to disappoint you. When it comes to AI, I haven't done a ton of research. And so we specifically didn't include that as a chapter in the book because there are lots of other books on it. And so I have not done the deep dive there. I will say it's happening faster than I had anticipated it was going to happen. And I think there's a lot of people who are not ready to accept that AI is like sort of starting to change our lives already. Like I have a lot of friends who are just like, no, I won't use it. And I'm like, you guys are totally missing out. Like I have collaborators. So I'm an ecologist by training. So I study animals. And there's a bunch of papers that we want to read that are written in Russian. And I read a little bit of Russian, but to go through a whole paper would take me forever. And
wait a minute. How do you read a little bit of Russian, please? I mean, I definitely, the question is still stands, which is, I want your informed forethought of where we may be going with AI. But I do want to know how you learned Russian.
I got interested in the Soviet space program, and I thought it would be way.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
I thought it would be way cooler to be able to read about it in Russian to see like what they were writing about in their own language. And so, as my pandemic activity, I started trying to learn Russian, but it's really hard. So I'm not that far along.
That is amazing.
Do astronauts lie in Russian as much as they do in English as well? Because that was my takeaway.
I'm sure. I'm sure they do. Yes, no, absolutely. That's universal. It binds us all together.
Okay. Well, you are a behavioral ecologist with an interest in.
Hold on. I'm not done with the AI question. No, I still would love your opinion of where it's going.
Again, I gotta say, I'm not super informed on AI in particular, but I think already it can speed us up in a lot of different ways. I think it might not be that long before we have like AI assistants helping with our scheduling and making us all more efficient. I've heard stories about people, like production groups where they've been able to cut down to like 10% of the staff, and the staff is collaborating with AI instead of like doing their own work. And I'm interested in your answers too, because as like artists and stuff, you probably interact with people who are competing with AI now. But so I don't know if if we're gonna get, the AI that's as smart as a human in the next 5 or 10 years, but I actually feel like it's really hard to predict what's gonna happen in the next 5 or 10 years at this point.
I just read a story about Walmart implementing an AI software that will know when you're going through a self-checkout if you are somebody who doesn't fully scan everything, and then in the future you won't be able to access their self-checkout because you've walked out without paying for something in the past.
Whoa.
Which is pretty fascinating.
That is pretty fascinating.
But for me personally, like I work in comic books, so as a writer and creator, I don't have a lot of issues with AI, but my artist friends do, because a lot of what they're putting out into the world is then being taken into AI and then regurgitated into other things. So they certainly have issues with that.
Yeah, there's a lot of right stuff.
Yeah, I kind of feel like there's going to be like, universal income, and we're all going to be sitting at home and letting AI do everything. And we're all going to be making the same amount of money doing whatever the hell we want, because AI is going to be taking care of everything. I mean, that's my concern. And also just kind of what you talked about. I think, the employment is going to change dramatically, and what you need people for. I mean, as an actor, I mean, at this point, they could basically just take my voice and take my likeness and create a performance. So I think, that's probably where that's going to go.
Which, is that in a contract, Danny? I don't want to get morbid, but if you were to
get morbid,
pass away, if you were to pass away during a production, do they automatically have the rights to do that, like in a contract?
I don't know what the language is. Let me call my attorney and ask him. But I'm assuming that, the studios, they'll find a way to finish a film or to finish a project.
Don't go dying on us here.
Hang in there.
So far, so good. But
go for your regular checkups.
But I think Jason was going to ask you, like, how you went from an ecologist whose interest is parasite manipulation to writing a book about space settlement.
I think my biggest weird fear in life is getting bored. And so almost all of my life, I've been like, oh, I'm going to do a little of this and I'm going to do a little of that. And then, as soon as I feel like I'm getting good at something, I switch to something else. And I am still a behavioral ecologist. I still do that work on parasites and fish. But, when my husband and I got this opportunity to write a book together, I was like, let's do it. I don't know anything about technology. I'd love to learn about it.
Is there a word for fear of boredom? Because we did one that was fear of happiness, which was carophobia. I did not know. But I wonder if you like this. Is fear of boredom like a real thing? Do we have an actual word? Do you know, Jason?
Thalassophobia. THAASO phobia. And it turns out that this is National Anti-Boredom Month, so this is perfect.
Yes, that's awesome.
That can't be true.
According to AI, it is.
And AI is never wrong.
AI is never wrong.
It's interesting. It's definitely wrong. Something like when we were researching the book, we were playing with AI for the heck of it, and we were like, give us the name of 10 books that are about what people eat in space. And the first 8 were books we had actually read. And then the next 2, we were like, oh, shit. Can I curse on your podcast?
Yeah, we can say anything.
All right. I was like, oh, so there's these 2 books that we missed. And then we looked them up and they did not exist. They were not real books. And then we were like, tell us about the author. And it just made stuff up about the author too.
Are they pulling from do you think like a movie or something, or is it just complete fiction?
I think it was just complete fiction. I think it just feels like it has to give you an answer, and it has to give you 10. So it finds 8 things, and then it gives you makes something up. So you definitely still have to be careful if you're using AI for, research stuff these days. You got to check everything.
It frightens me. Now, how did you guys, I mean, obviously you're a husband and wife team. You've written a number of books. How did you start collaborating on writing things together? Or is that how the relationship started? I don't know.
No, the relationship started on OkCupid because it was free and we both like free stuff. So we both got on this free website.
Outstanding.
Wait, so AI brought you together? This is coming full circle,
An algorithm brought us together, but I don't know, was it AI back then? So this was 2007.
I don't
and
know,
AI's
yeah.
been around for a
Now
while.
you're giving AI credit for everything, Jason. No, this.
What if all of a sudden I peel off my face and I am AI?
No,
this was a connection website that the algorithm put them together, and here we are. That's fantastic. So that's how you got. And then how did it turn into writing together?
So my husband is a web cartoonist. He does a cartoon called Saturday Morning Breakfast Cereal, and there's a more popular science-themed webcomic called XKCD. And that guy, Randall Munroe, did a book, and the book did really well. And so his agent was like, all right, these science webcomic nerds, they might be like, they might be able to write books. So let's go to the next one down. And that was my husband. And my husband and I had just stopped doing a podcast together because we had our first kid and she was really loud and nobody wanted to hear that. And we couldn't find a quiet space. And so we decided we'd write this book together. So he said, yeah, I'll do it, but I'd like to write it with my wife. And we're a pretty good team. He's also a nerd, so he does the research too. And then I'm a nerd and I know where to get the scientific research, and he makes it funny and draws comics.
And how did he know that you? I mean, had you read articles? I mean, there's a difference between being informed and interested and curious and have fear of boredom, and being able to write a coherent book about a specific subject with somebody that you live with.
And you're also writing with such personality, which I love, and I can see that in your personality right now. But to be able to translate that into an own distinctive voice is not always easy either.
It was maybe a leap of faith to think that we could do this well together, especially because we didn't really know a lot about emerging technologies, and we knew even less about space settlements, which is why the book that we proposed to our publishers is nothing like the book we thought we were going to write, because we had done this much of the necessary research ahead of time. But we both just know that we are people who you can stick a stack of textbooks in front of us and we will read every page and take notes on all of them. And I think because of that, we feel like we can handle almost any topic because we're just willing to do it.
So in essence, you both knew that each other had the wherewithal to be able to do the necessary research in order to have put out a quality product, in essence.
Yeah. When we started dating, we would spend all day at the San Jose Library together, just doing our various research stuff.
I mean, this is a match made in heaven, these two people. This is outstanding.
We're pretty big nerds, yeah. It works for us, though.
Well, no, it's just that's the whole thing, right? They talk about it. As the relationships progress, common interests become more and more important.
Yeah, no doubt.
It's true.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
So have you found in ways where it has positively impact your day-to-day life together that you're working together? Has it elevated your marriage in a way that you didn't expect?
Well, so one nice thing is that the first book did so well that I could quit my job. And so I was officially at Rice University and getting paid to teach. And then now I'm adjunct, so I'm still affiliated, but I don't get paid by them. And so we were able to move out to the middle of Virginia. So we're actually in a suburb in the middle of the woods. And so now I work from home and I do my weird parasite research in our barn. And we read our stuff and we go on long walks in the woods and we talk about, we have long debates about how to interpret international space law. And it's fun. He's the right guy for me.
I mean, I want to be at your coffee table in the morning. I mean, this is fantastic. Yeah. What are you doing today, babe? Going out to the barn?
Yeah, I hope the next book title is Weird Parasite Research in the Barn, because that has a nice ring to it.
I'm trying to get Zach to write about parasites next, but he's not as excited about that.
I'll just throw a few books in front of him. Who knows what's going to happen?
It could go anywhere.
Here's the thing that Jason touched on a little bit, which I obviously comes from your personality, but you were really able to put your sense of humor and your tone, which I'm a big tone fan. I love films with specific tones, especially comedic stuff. And I was just blown away at your voice in writing the book. Is this something that you discovered? Did your husband know about this? Because it really makes it so entertaining to read. I mean, and also just the way you you guys put the information in. It just feels like I'm watching a late night talk show when I'm reading it.
Well, thanks. I mean, so Zach and I are both pretty informal people. And so we write informally, like we're talking to somebody at a bar. But the first couple drafts are mostly just facts and they're not funny. But then after we go through, Zach does a comedy run where he adds extra jokes and
It's like you, Jason, a comedy run.
Add the flavor.
Yeah. Oh, so is that how you write too? You do like a serious run and then you add the comedy on after?
Yeah, you have to find the beats and the moments where it needs to come to life a little bit. But what you're doing too, I mean, I work in educational graphic novels quite a bit, so you do have to help the kids remember these things. But you are making it so accessible by doing that I can walk away and remember facts that if I was just reading facts, they wouldn't stick with me.
Oh, you made my day.
But it's so true. It's like there's a personality to the information, the way you're handing it out that feels accessible in a way that I've never read in a science book before.
Oh, thank you so much.
Was Zach approached with a specific book about space exploration or space settlement?
No, so this was when we wrote Soonish, there was a chapter on cheap access to space. And while we were writing it, we kept like having to revise it because Elon Musk and SpaceX were just like doing one incredible thing after another. And then there was another chapter on asteroid mining. And back when we were writing the book, there were two big asteroid mining companies, Deep Space Industries and Planetary Resources. And they were saying, like, we're going to be mining asteroids soon. And Luxembourg was throwing tons of money at them because they wanted to get into the asteroid mining game. And so by the time we finished the book, we were like, you know what? It's going to be cheap to send stuff to space. And like, we're going to need tons of equipment to keep us safe in space. And we're going to be able to get all these resources from asteroids.
And fling them back to Earth, right? That's the most...
It's scary.
Yes, you gave me nightmares.
Yeah. And it doesn't even have to be malicious, right?
No.
It could just be like a miscalculation. And
right.
Like, oh, man.
I have backed into my mailbox once or twice. I can't imagine if you're backing an asteroid into South America, that's going to be very, very good. So it worries me.
Yeah, no, the dinosaurs would tell us we need to be very careful about these sorts of things.
And so in terms of this book, did Zach go to the publisher and go, okay, look, I know you want this. What about this subject? Or was it something that was posited to you guys? I mean, I think you may have just answered that.
Yeah, it was our idea. So after our first book, they were like, all right, what do you want to write next? And we were like, well, actually, we'd like a whole year off because we way overdo it and everything else in our lives gets sort of pushed to the side. So we needed a year to recover. But in that year, we were like, oh man, it was so fun, like reading about space law and reading about rockets and maybe space settlements are coming. So let's pitch a book on that. And so we thought it was going to be about, psychology in isolated and confined environments. So you're going to be in these like tiny little habitats.
You touch on that, yeah.
Yeah, we touch on it a little, but we thought it was going to be like, we were going to overview polar expeditions and what life was like on these like multi-year voyages on these tiny little boats and how people got along with each other. But then in the end, we were like, we are nowhere near going to a space settlement. We had to completely change all the chapters we thought we'd write about.
I was reading it in the evening, and then I'd come back to the dinner table the next day, and I'd like tell my kids the story about how poop particles are flying through space. But they were like so interested. There's no way I could have got them interested in a space conversation if I did not start with poop particles.
What about space settlement? You guys write, how does democracy function in a society where air is rationed and possibly under corporate control? How does sociology change if humans can't reproduce unless they're in Earth normal gravity? And how do we avoid a scramble for territory if some regions of space are better than others?
So those are all, huge questions. So I'll start with the last one. So on the moon in particular, most of the moon is just crap and you wouldn't want to live there. And that's true for anywhere in space. But on the moon, if you're going to set up a settlement, you're going to want to be on the poles. And that's because that's the only place you can get water. Okay, so yes, there's tiny little particles maybe of water in the dirt on the rest of the moon, but there's like more water and cement, right? So you're not going to want to be trying to collect it from there. But on the poles, you get these craters where the sunlight never hits, and there's water trapped in those craters as ice. And on the rim of that crater, you can set up solar panels so you can get energy and get your electricity. Whereas if you're at the equator, you have 2 weeks worth of nighttime to deal with. And we do not have battery packs to handle that. And so, but the area is like, it's like a couple of, 200 acres of farms worth of like land that's going to be worth settling on the poles of the moon. And both the US and China are like, yes, we're going to the moon. We're going to set up settlements. And it looks like we're maybe in a new arms race. And whereas when we were in that arms race with the USSR, it's like, well, who can touch the moon first? And that's it. But when you touch the moon, someone else can come and touch that same spot and there's no problem.
But as you pointed out in the book, Kelly, is that they're really in that arms race for those poles for not much, right? There's not much there, even in those craters.
Well, I mean, geopolitics can be stupid.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's not much water there. There's like, so Sardis Lake is some random lake we found, I think in Minnesota. It's a human-made lake, and the moon has the same amount of water as Sardis Lake. So it's a tiny amount of water. This is a lake no one's heard of. It's, not even like Lake Superior or something.
Yeah, and El Nino is not bringing water there to refresh it
Exactly.
every couple months.
Yeah, right. And so if you use it as rocket fuel, for example, you've burned it into the vacuum of space and it's gone. And so, I mean, it's going to be hard setting up a settlement with this small amount of water anyway. And, the dust, so, you like go outside and you pick up some dirt. That dirt is not like the dirt on the moon. The dirt on the moon has been like slammed by micrometeorites over and over and over again. It's like teeny tiny pieces of jagged glass that are like dust that you can breathe in. That's probably going to be scratching your lungs. Like, the moon is an awful place, but we still look like we're set to have this new space race, and it's mostly about, like prestige and who can do it first. And
so it's for somebody to say, we did it. I got there before you, neener.
Right. But now they're going to stay there, right? And so like, if you're going to have a settlement, you're going to like set up there, but international law is very unclear. Like, you're not allowed to claim sovereignty. So you can't say, we got here first, this belongs to America. But you can get there first and not leave. Right.
Because you can say you're doing, I think you pointed out, you can say you're in the middle of an experiment, and that experiment can last however long you want it to.
A lifetime, 3 lifetimes, yeah. And so, how is China going to feel if we're at like literally the best spot? Are they going to like try to kick us out? Are they like, there's tons of, there's a major lack of clarity here. And then you've got these 2 nuclear powers who are like getting along less and less well over time. And like, we're going to scramble for the moon. That would be bad. So maybe that's enough on one of the 3 questions.
No, it's fascinating. As I listen to you, I come up with more and more questions. Like, I'm thinking about, international negotiation for, between countries. We can barely do that now. I can't imagine that, the idea that we're going to be able to do that in space is going to change anybody's view on it. I can't imagine.
Even internally, regardless of your politics, we now have no House Speaker for how long internally. So how are we going to decide to set things up even within our own country on another planet or object?
Yeah, I mean, most of the players that you talk to, especially in the US, are like, look, we're not even trying to make things happen through the United Nations anymore. There's no way we're going to get everyone to agree. It's way too complicated. So we're just going to like tell people what we're doing, and then if a country agrees, they can sign on, and that'll be great. And that's called the Artemis Accord.
Yeah, so take the country out of it, Kelly. You mentioned Elon Musk. If he gets there first, he's in there. It becomes the United States' responsibility because this is where he's from, correct?
That's right. Yeah. According to international law, Musk can't just go to Mars and do whatever he wants. The United States is supposed to rein him in, which I feel like is a big misunderstanding. We'll talk to people and they'll be like, well, no, who can hold Musk back? He can just go to Mars and start his settlement, and it's going to be so awesome that no one can stop him. And like, maybe it would be awesome, but the United States can say, we are not giving you a launch license, so you don't get to go. And of course, he could say, okay, we're taking all of our stuff and moving it to the Kingdom of Tonga, which I think he's actually trying to get some licensing through there right now. But anyway, so he could go to someone with laxer laws and become their responsibility.
I thought you made that up. Even that's informed. I love it.
But if Elon is taking off, let's say whatever country is representing his launch, and it crashes into another country, that country of launch is responsible, right?
Yeah, and there have been a couple situations where a country is essentially responsible for a launch where if it crashed, it's like the entire income of their country for 3 years would have to go to covering the expenses. And so people are allowing launches that they almost certainly could not cover if things went wrong. And insurance is a huge space lawyer topic that I find quite boring. Didn't read textbooks on that.
No, the insurance
No.
company, the insurance on that was not part of your research packet.
I have limits.
There was something that you forced me to research, Kelly, which was, and I was upset about it after the fact, because fingernail delamination, you suggest to the reader to go look it up for themselves. And I did. And it was about, 11 o'clock at night. I was ready to put the Kindle down. And I really didn't want to know about astronaut fingernails falling off in space.
I think we said don't look it up.
Yeah, but that's like you're basically telling me don't open that box. Don't look in the box.
That's true. Yeah, so the context here is that moving around in a spacesuit is a huge pain in the ass. And like it's like being in a huge pressurized balloon. And so when you go to try to grip something, you have to like press against the spacesuit to get the joints to bend. And astronauts will frequently have their fingernails sort of ripped off as they're trying to like grip on things. And that's called delamination.
Huh.
Yeah, all kinds of gross stuff.
Yeah, stuff you don't think about as a common Earth walker.
Yeah,
I guess.
what? Speaking of Earth walking, what grossed my husband out the most is that when you're not walking on your feet because you're like on the International Space Station, you don't need your feet. You're pulling yourself along with your hands. All the calluses on your feet start coming off. And sometimes I guess they just come off in big sheets, and then they'll sort of be like floating around. You got to grab them and put them in the trash.
Oh, goodness gracious.
So gross.
And then what, you've got like a baby, you've got soft baby soles is basically
Yes.
what you end up with?
Yep, and then you got to come back home, and it's not pleasant.
Can you tell our listeners a little bit about what you research in terms of what companies like Pepsi have posited and want to do in terms of selling their product in space? And can you just talk a little bit about where this could go?
Sure. Yeah. Can I first talk about the first commercial filmed in space?
By all means, yes.
Yes.
So after the Soviet Union fell, Russia was still running this space station called Mir, but they like did not have money to keep that shit going. And so they started to allow companies to sell stuff or to make commercials in their space station. And so this Israeli milk company called Tenuva was the first one to get their commercial in space, but they needed like brand help because they had been putting a carcinogen in their milk and they got caught.
Jesus.
And so they needed like something exciting enough to get people to forget that. And so they did this shot in space, and the cosmonauts were just like, they were not into this at all. They're like up there doing this amazing epic stuff, but now they got to stop to film commercials, and they weren't excited about it. And so one of the films, like when you put milk in space, it sort of like forms a sphere and floats around, and he had to like catch it in the air. And I guess they made him re-record it the next day because he wasn't smiling enough, which just seems like
we need another take.
So
This was no good. We need another take.
Yeah. And so anyway, it was depressing, but it's a hilarious commercial. And in the meantime, let's see, Pizza Hut has sent pizza to space. Pepsi got the cosmonauts on Mir to get this giant like blow up. I think it was 8-foot tall Pepsi can that they had to take out on spacewalks, and like they had to shoot video from the like portals to try to get the cosmonauts walking around with these Pepsi cans. And like spacewalks are very dangerous. Like, and here they are trying to like finagle these Pepsi cans in space. But Pepsi, I guess at one point was researching how much it would cost to laser their logo on the moon. And I think they decided it would have to be as big as Texas so that it could be seen from Earth, and would be like, gosh, I don't remember the number. I'm sure millions, maybe $1 billion, just a ton of money.
You would hope also somebody's conscience would have kicked in as well, and not just a budget issue, and said, maybe we won't, destroy the moon with a Pepsi logo.
You'd hope so. But so like, there's no international law saying that you can't like put commercials or ads or billboards in orbit for everybody to see. The US, I believe, has laws saying that we can't do that. But all you need to do is go to a country that doesn't have a law like that and just stick it in orbit and send it over the US.
Oh, man.
And so I think the United Nations was going to tackle this problem once, but they decided there's more pressing things going on at the moment. We're going to put this question off for another day. So right now there's no international law, and I would not be surprised if Ronald McDonald follows us to space.
Well, and you kind of touch on this in the book, and I was hoping you could speak on it, and this kind of feeds into that. But the closest that we have to space laws here on Earth is like early maritime laws, correct? In terms of like what could and couldn't be done in international waters and can be done in space?
Yeah, so like early maritime law was sort of an inspiration for, air law and space law, but in 1967 we got our first United Nations treaty specifically about space, and that was, when the space race was heating up, and in particular it was when the Soviet Union and the USA were sending nuclear weapons into space and blowing them up to see, like, can you knock out
testing them?
Yeah, well, they were testing them
and not telling us, right? We didn't know that at the time.
I think that they ended up doing some low enough that it became too hard to hide. Like, I think the Soviets knocked out a power grid in Kazakhstan when they were doing their experiments, and like the Soviets lied about everything, but I think it was hard to hide that. But we were trying to see, like, can you knock out your enemy's satellites by essentially just like blasting everything with radiation? And the answer is yeah, but you knock yours out too, and that's probably not great. But that got everybody scared enough that they were like, all right, we're going to do international law. So they came up with the treaty. They came up with like 5 follow-on treaties. One of them didn't get a lot of signatures. And then after that, nobody could really agree on major treaties about space anymore. So there's lots of like agreements between countries, but as you noted, it's hard to get countries to agree on just about anything.
I wrote a note here when you were talking earlier in the conversation that you had a different pitch to the publisher at first. And I'm wondering if you were more in the, yes, we can live in space camp at first until after the fact. And did it change your opinion doing all the research?
Yeah, so I'm a huge sci-fi nerd. And I just thought, you see these pictures of like waking up in a glass dome and you'd see, the Earth, from your bed and on the moon. And that just sounded incredible to me. And we thought we could probably do this stuff soon. And so the book we pitched was like, here's what the coming decades will be like as we become a multiplanetary species. And the more research we did, the more we were like, we don't know enough about how bodies respond to space, how brains respond to space. Can you have babies in space? We can't make the habitats that we need. And so, partway through writing the book, our editor was like, guys, you have to accept that you're not writing the book that you pitched, and you need to change your tone. Because we had made friends with all these space.
How far into the process was this? I was going to say, was this after the first or a few drafts into it? He's like, different book.
It was maybe 3/4 of the way through, because we had made friends with all these space settlement people. So we had been maybe working on it for like 2.5 to 3 years. And we didn't want to be the people who are like, thank you for all of the time you spent with us, but now we think you're wrong. And that's what our book is about. Surprise.
Well, it's interesting. You wrote something that I think we're on it now, but if you could speak to it, because I think that's where essentially the book lands, if in my opinion. The more capacity we have to do things in space, the more capacity we have for self-annihilation.
Yeah. So as Jason was alluding to earlier, when you get the ability to move things like asteroids and comets around in space, you also have the ability to accidentally have those land on Earth, or you have a terrorist has the ability to fling them at the Earth, and that could be massively catastrophic. And also, going out to space, if we have these fights over the few good pieces of land on the moon, you could end up with like confrontation between nuclear powers like the US and China. And so there's a lot of people talk about going to space as a way to save humanity and to create a backup. But I'm not convinced anymore that existential threat goes down when we go out into space if we're not careful about how we do it.
Well, and it seems like quality of life goes far down as well if you're going out into space, and frankly, we're pretty spoiled right now. At least a great percentage of the population here on Earth.
I agree. Space is horrible, and I don't think most people realize how horrible it is.
There was one thing in the book, Kelly, where you're talking about. You mentioned like if you can even physically have a baby in space, but you talk about like a woman's pelvis might even shatter upon having the baby because it's just. It's not something we're willing to, or as humans, just want to go and test out. And B, who's going to be the first person to give it a try and have to discover that in the wrong way? It's not easy ground to traverse over.
No, I mean it's scary. Like that, the astronauts on the International Space Station, they lose 1.5% of what's called aerial bone mineral density, which is how you quantify osteoporosis. So 1.5% of like their bones are going away in their hips every month. And that might slow down on Mars where you have some gravity, but
I don't want to take the risk. It's already tough getting older. I mean, Jesus.
I know. I agree. Yeah. And like, if you spend an entire lifetime on Mars as opposed to just like a couple months or maybe a year, like the longest stay in space is 437 days. So we don't know that much about being in space. I would not want to be the first woman who was trying to give birth on Mars after being there for a decade. Like, I wouldn't want to cross my fingers that my hips were going to hold up when labor kicks in.
That's okay. There'll be a line way before you. I promise you right now. Yeah, I could just for the posts, just for the social media posts, I could see people getting in line to do that.
That's true. Yeah, there'll be a reality show.
Well, there's a company that wants to send a woman up to space. And I think they've backed off a little bit. They want to do that in a couple years or something. But there are people who are interested in making this happen as fast as possible. And it could accidentally happen when space tourism, becomes a thing. Maybe conception. They probably won't be up there for 9 months. But, we might get these answers faster.
There's so many interesting things that you and your husband sort of put forth that I think as people who see space settlement, like you said earlier, for yourself, sci-fi fans, you see this sort of beautiful dome and you're living in with trees and fresh oxygen inside there. And then there's all these little things that you don't consider until I read your book. Like, okay, if you needed emergency surgery, how are you going to get that done? If even if there is a doctor there, nothing's going to stay in your body as soon as they cut you open.
Yeah. I mean, if you're on Mars, the blood will fall. But if you're like traveling to Mars and you're in that microgravity environment, that blood's going to be going all over the place. And those glass domes that I've mentioned a couple times, you're not going to have those. You would get baked in the radiation of space, which is different than the radiation on Earth. So every proposal that I've seen has involved like meters of dirt or water being layered on top to protect you from radiation. So it's going to be more like living in an ant tunnel than it is, those beautiful artistic renditions of, looking out at space. I don't think it's going to be like that.
Can you sort of touch a little bit on what you think the timeline is for the first big change regarding space? What do you see as, like you mentioned, tourism or perhaps settlement? What's the timeline that, based on your research, you think we have here? I mean, it's 2023 at recording.
So it really, these timeline things are hard. I'm going to give you the answer you don't want.
You don't know? Maybe I want this answer. Maybe I don't want to know. You don't know me.
You're right. That's right. I'm sorry. I take it back. So like if the United States government decided there is nothing more important to us than beating China to the moon, we already have a plan to go back to the moon and put, boots back on the ground. We could invest a ton of stuff in making these research stations, and we could, set up at the poles. And, maybe we could do that in a decade if we decided that it was, as important as we thought the Apollo program was. I hope we don't go that route. But, I think in my lifetime, I hope we won't have settlements. I hope we set up a research station on the Mars where we do a bunch of biology research to see how safe this stuff is. I think that could happen in the next couple decades. But I don't think we're going to see settlements unless we also see a space race, which could be catastrophic. So I hope that doesn't happen.
But as you point out, even in the asteroids, there just isn't anything that's super appealing that you can't necessarily find here already.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes you wonder that, obviously people want to say we're the first to do something. Whether that's private,
Sure,
like Elon Musk, or government, whatever it is. But at some point, you would hope that people start outweighing or looking at how the risks outweigh any sort of positive benefits that it would bring to society as a whole. But unfortunately, we don't live in that world, I guess.
Yeah, well, I do think a lot of the people who are, I talked to this one guy who was big in an asteroid mining company, and I expected him to be all about like, well, I'm in it because you could be the first trillionaire. You keep hearing this, the first trillionaire will be a space person probably. But he really was in it because he thought that if we bring the resources to space or from space to Earth, we can drive down the cost of things like, platinum, and we can lift people out of poverty. And I don't actually see how these various things fit together to lift everybody out of poverty. I don't buy the argument, but I really bought that he bought it. I don't think he was just putting me on. And so I don't think all of these people are motivated by by greed.
But you point out in the book that would then bankrupt certain countries that do rely on mining.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have an audience question, so I'm going to ask you because they're always interested. So Terry V asks, Did writing this book make you appreciate Earth even more than you had?
You know, the answer should be yes, but I really appreciate Earth. Like, I would not want to leave. I spend a ton of my life, just looking at insects that live on trees. I've helped describe 2 of them as new species, and I love it here. And maybe I do appreciate a little more how easy it is to just go outside and breathe without like my blood boiling off. That's pretty solid. But I did, to be honest, I like the idea of other people going to Mars. Like, I think it would be cool to be multiplanetary, but I'm really happy here. It's gorgeous here, and I'm not going to be able to discover any new wasps on Mars unless Mars has a big surprise in store for us.
Oh, my head hurts. There's so many thoughts going through it and so many concerns. And being a parent, you start thinking, because my kid, this could happen, my child and your children, this could be their world. It could be an option. Instead of, do I move to Florida? Do I move to Mars? Is that where I go? It's nice there in the summers.
Here's what I sort of take from the whole thing, which I really enjoyed the book. I really enjoyed talking to Kelly, but I don't even fly an airplane, so there's no way in hell I'm going to Mars, even if I give the
Oh
option.
yeah, you're not going. First of all, you don't go to Boston.
No,
let alone go to Mars.
I'm not getting on a rocket ship, so I feel like as long as there's email, which I hear there is, there'll be not on Mars, but on the moon and in orbit, there'll be email. I'll keep in touch with my kids. Is that cold?
Yeah, you say that now, except that you spent some time away from. You're like, fuck it, I'm getting on the spaceship.
Yeah, but they're still little now. They're not going yet.
No, but it's just fascinating to think that, to think about it. And
Yeah, I know.
She brings up so many interesting questions that, I mean, the thing that came up for me, I was starting to get paranoid. I was like, given that we're humans, the idea that we have somewhere else to go, perhaps, pushing the button is not so abhorrent to certain leaders, given that there's alternatives. It's kind of like the, what's the film with Meryl Streep and Leo DiCaprio about the asteroid coming?
Oh yeah, don't look up. Don't look up. Yeah,
just reminds me of that. Like, oh no, we got ours. We got our spaceship. We're good. Oh, everybody else can go fuck themselves.
I didn't even think about that. Yeah, I guess if you see all of the leaders of one country taking a trip to the moon, you might be a little concerned about what's going to happen next.
Well, what a fascinating conversation and an interesting book, and can't wait for the next one. And for everyone, thanks for listening.
Music by Denny Nucci. Produced and edited by the same 2 people you heard hosting this show because they have no friends.